What's up guys, Belamy Prime here, and I am back at it again with some ArcheAge. I'm finally getting back into the game. I've been playing over on the Southeast Asian server the last few weeks, and I have been gearing myself an Archer character. So, for the first time on this channel, we should be seeing some Archer gameplay in the near future. And since I've returned, I've realized that a few of my old build videos are a little bit outdated now. There are, some builds on there that are still very relevant. They're just, new and improved versions of them in the current meta. But there are some builds on them that are a little bit outdated because they use iron add pieces and things like that. Because those videos I made in, I think, late 2019, I think. Some of them early 2020. So at that point, iron add pieces, taking them in some cases, were still relevant if you just wanted to do big dick damage and not, be necessarily tanky. But nevertheless, they're a bit outdated, so we're going to get back into it with some more build videos for you guys, just kind of covering armor sets and gear setups for different classes. So we'll most likely do one for Archer, Melee, and Mages. If you guys are interested in, tanks or healers, I'd be more than happy to do that too. I thoroughly enjoy putting builds together, but as far as my personal game experience goes, I'm definitely more versed in understanding the melee and the mage side, and my third best would be Archer, because I have played it in the past, though I haven't played it with as good a ping as I have on Southeast Asia, so look forward to the new Archer gameplay that you guys will be getting in the near future. But since we're playing Archer, obviously I'm going to do Archer builds first. I can't even remember if I've done Archer builds before. I think I have, but I can't. Honestly, I don't know. But either way, if we haven't done it, we're doing it now. And these are going to be for 2021 and the upcoming meta, and we're going to have a little bit of fun. But I'm going to be covering some builds today. I got 4 builds here for you guys. They'll all be in the link, linked in the description below. If you scroll down at any point, you can feel free to look through the builds while we go through the video, but we're going to be covering mostly today just different armor setups, and in some cases some different weapon setups. But before we start getting into the actual setups of the builds here, I want to kind of preface this by saying that a lot of the things on today's builds are going to be very similar in terms of gems. In every case, we're going to have range crit rate gems in our cap, which you can replace with some hero gems if you wish to do that, obviously sacrificing some crit rate. In our jerkin, we're going to have resilience gems. In our sashes, we're going to be using... what is it? A sash? Okay, yeah. In our sashes, we're going to be using piercing shot gems. You can replace these with ranged attack gems or defense gems if you're interested in that. It's really personal preference. In our sleeves, I like to use snare and slow effect duration gems. These are called movement gems. And I like to use these because, if you get slowed or snared as an archer, it's pretty tough. If you can avoid those and cancel those out, it can be very beneficial, especially against melees. If you can, if a snare or a slow falls off before a melee turns that one of those 2 CCs into a trip, it will save you often, and you get more percent value out of these because they're 6%. On here on the ArcheAge calc, they say 4%, but in game they're actually 6%, whereas every other CC reduction gem is only 4%. The movement ones are actually 6%. So at Eternal, you're getting 36% reduction on slows and snares, which in my opinion is really good, and they're really good value for money because they're generally very cheap gems. They're about, at the moment on Southeast Asian servers, they're about 2k gold each. Depends on your server and where you're playing, whether it's Legacy or Unchained, NA, whatever. They'll be different, but they're going to be nowhere near as much as like Thunderwing Titan gems, for example, which are going to go for like 20 to 30k each, depending on where you're playing, of course. In our gloves, I like to take evasion rate because it's your best line of defense against any melee and any other archer. And you can take range attack here or like defense, like I said before as well. You can also take focus if you're more of a raid versus raid focused player. Focus is really, really good because you'll find that evasion is not something that's going to save you all that often. It's mostly just good for arena and 1 vs 1. So evasion rate is what I like to take, but focus is a great option. So is range attack, and so is defense. If you want to be a slightly more defensive archer with maybe shields or something, that's fine too. Our cloak's going to be all the same. I'm using ignore armor. I'll explain that a little bit later in the video. But so this defense penetration, it's called ignore armor on the ArcheAge calc. You can take crit here if you would like, but we'll get into that later. On our breeches, we're going to be taking toughness gems, nothing different here. And on our boots, for the most part, I'm going to be taking resilience gems because I like to be a bit more defensive here. And but you can take movement speed ones here, which one of our builds will include today. So On our right side, we got our Soul Liberator. You can take a Halsey Neck in this slot if you would like, but on your Soul Liberator, I would highly recommend Defense Pen, Skill Damage, and Ranged Attack. A lot of people seem to undervalue flat attack on most builds, no matter what class they're playing, but especially for Archer, flat ranged attack is actually way more valuable than it is for, say, Mage and Melee, simply because the flat DPS that you have on your bow as compared to, the flat DPS on a melee weapon or the flat magic attack on a magic weapon is much, much lower, so you get more value per point for things like flat range attack on your necklace, flat range attack on your costume, and just more DPS value out of those. So I like to take flat range attack where I can, because I think it's more valuable on an archer. On our Noriette earrings, I like to take evasion and receive receive damage. A lot of people like to take receive damage and then health, just to help with that. But for me, I prefer the evasion, just because the more evasion I have, the safer I feel up against melees, and it can save you against other archers as well. Evasion is really, really good. For our Flawless Hiram ring, it's the same, pretty standard. Receive damage and defense penetration, and some ranged skill damage. Now, ranged skill damage is not the greatest stat on archers, in my opinion, but it is damage. It's nowhere near as crazy as like a two-hand staff or a two-hand melee with skill damage, but it's still good. And then we can take a Noriette ring. We're going to have defense pen and skill damage on that as well. Now, majority of our builds today are going to be range crit damage scaling builds. Mostly, though, they're hybrid, but your main focus is going to be your crit damage. And the reason why this is still very much the meta for archers, whereas you'll see a lot of mages and melees are switching over to pure defense penetration, is simply because archers can scale their crit damage much higher than those classes because of passives such as steady shooting. I think it's called, the one that gives you 58% crit damage. And if you're playing Ebonsong, which you probably should be if you're playing an archer, you'll also have the rhythm stacks, so that'll give you 22.5%, I think, is what that is at max nowadays. So you can very easily push up to your crit damage cap, even after they increase the cap to 350% as an archer, no problem. But what we like to build is crit damage, so we max our crit damage and get to the cap, and then we try and hybrid the whole build so we get as much defense penetration as possible. So you'll notice all of our weapons will have agility, defense penetration, range crit damage. So we're scaling our range crit. You can see here our range critical damage is 371%. You add another 58% for steady shooting and another 22% for rhythm, and you're sitting at the cap, basically. I think you're exactly on the cap with this current build. And then you'll also be sitting at a nice crisp 7k defense penetration. And if you add in Deadeye, you're going to get another 3k on top of that. So 10k defense penetration and capped crit damage is really, really insane. It's no wonder that archers do crazy damage. But yeah, that's going to be the setup for our weapons. In terms of our flute, we're going to be running attack speed, and I'd like to put evasion and range attack in here. Like I said, I've explained the reason why I like both of those roles. A lot of people do like to take movement speed in here, which I have no arguments against. That's great, especially if you're going movement speed in your boots and like to stack movement speed. As far as our rolls on our underwear and our costume, we're taking... I like to take magic damage reduction because I like to be protected against mages. There are a lot of mages, no matter where you play. Mage seems to be the most popular class, and magic damage reduction, to me, is more valuable than melee damage reduction, simply because I have a lot of evasion in most builds, and I rely on that to protect me against melees, hopefully. So then we'll take a bit of resilience, some defense penetration, range attack. Like I said, I like the flat range attack, range critical rate, and pretty much the same situation on our costume. So we got defense pen, range attack, crit damage, crit rate, and some resilience in there as well. So as far as my defenses go, I like to get my resilience above 12k. That seems to be just a nice spot to have it. As far as toughness goes, you really, really want to be above 4k if you can. If you can get to 4.5k, that's when the soft cap starts to happen. So that's like the best value for toughness you'll get. You will feel a lot squishier if you're under 4k toughness. It's tough if you're using... it's tough, get it right. It's tough getting that much toughness when you're using a library setup, which is what this first build is. So we'll get into that now. So the main thing, like I said, we're going to be focusing on is the armor, because for the most part, your weapons, you're pretty much locked into what the best thing is. A lot of people ask about, is Scepter the best main hand weapon? It really doesn't matter anymore. The only reason people really took Scepters back in the day, people just kind of kept the mindset in. But the reason why people took Scepters once upon a time was because the poisons that you applied as an archer scaled off magic attack. They still do, but it's very insignificant. So Scepter is absolutely not necessary. On my archer on Southeast Asia, I have a katana and a dagger just because I like the look of the two together. You do not have to take a scepter. It's just what a lot of people you'll see like to do for whatever reason. If anything, make it a club, so that way if you really want to do like solo PvE stuff with self-healing, like soloing bosses and things like that, you can, throw on some vitalism, have enough healing power from your club, and then, you throw a couple fervents on yourself or something. But club's probably the best option in terms of versatility. So the first build today is going to be a 5-piece library setup, and then 2 Hiram pieces. And I'll explain the reason behind that, and that's basically to get the 5-set bonus of the library set, which is going to give you 3-set bonus is the attack speed, 5-set bonus is the flat attack stacking, which is the 1% stacks up to 5 times, so 5% additional range attack, which scales really nicely with our flat range attack that we've added everywhere for this build. And not only that, but we're taking 5 pieces of the Disciples set simply to get the Lunafrosts. Now, the Lunafrosts are a little bit of a pain to grind, but the 5 set of the Rage is going to give you 600 defense penetration, which is really, really good on this hybrid build. And the 3 set's also going to give you 5% crit rate, which is also really nice. So we're trying to get that double dip of that 5-set bonus on the Disciples Swift set. You do have to have tier 2 to put the Lunafrosts on, so it's a bit of a grind to get it, because you have to get the tier 2 for starters, and then you have to get the Frost as well, which is annoying to get, but nevertheless very good if you do get it. So we got the 5-set bonus, we got a nice chunk of attack speed, nice flat attack, defense penetration, and some crit rate, all very good stats, and in my opinion, well worth sacrificing some Lunafrosts, ones that give you toughness and such. Now, with this kind of setup, you have... I don't like to go full 7. We do have a build shortly that I'll show you guys where it is full 7 out of 7. But in my opinion, the has a chance to ignore target's full defense. It's good, but it's on a slightly... The cooldown is slightly too long, and as an archer, more likely than not, it's going to proc on an Endless Arrow. And yes, the case can be made that you're using Flame Endless Arrows these days, and that's really good, because, that does those arrows do a significant chunk of damage, and if it does proc on that, that's great. But as an archer, you apply bleeds, and bleeds can waste this proc. So if I was to Stalker's Mark someone and hit them with 2, I forget what the arrow is called. I've still not familiarized myself with the skills. I know what all the skills do. I just can't remember the names for them. The piercing shot, I think it is. The one where you can shoot it 3 times. Actual just ape brain, can't remember what any of the skills are. I know what everything does, I know what all the passives are, I just don't know what the names are, because I don't even care to look at the names. But nevertheless, if you Stalker's Mark someone and piercing shot them, it's going to apply a bleed, which is going to, scale the rest of your damage, things with like your charge bolt and stuff like that, which is great, but that bleed itself can actually consume this proc. So the way it works is say I attack someone with a single Endless Arrow, it will proc, which then will give my next attack. Essentially, it gives you 100,000 defense penetration. So when it says full, it just gives you a flat 100k defense penetration, because obviously it's impossible for someone to have more than 100,000 defense. So it gives you that much defense penetration for your next attack. So if I was to Endless Arrow someone twice and it procced on the first one, the second one would apply the defense penetration and do a chunk of damage. However, if you get unlucky and you apply a bleed and then you're shooting, it's basically 50-50 that it's going to apply to an actual attack, because the bleed ticks nice and fast, and it's got just an equal amount of chance to actually consume this defense penetration proc, which is really annoying and kind of bullshit. If they made it so that the bleeds... I'm not sure if poisons can too, because poison is magic, unless the melee version of the poison can proc it as well. I haven't actually tested with the poison. I've tested with the bleed. I know for certain that the bleed can proc it. But with the poisons, might as well. So it could be even worse as an archer if you're using poisons, which with the new evasion reduction poison, you definitely should be using it. So the proc, in my opinion, is kind of just... It's too inconsistent on archers and melees because of the bleeds. It's even kind of shitty on mages as well because it procs on their, their damage over time things. So like their lightning and shit like that. So I don't like the 7 out of 7. I built it on my melee and was just super disappointed when I discovered that this is how it worked and how it functioned. So I don't like it as much. It's still good, if just very inconsistent, and you can't rely on the proc to give you a decent chunk of damage every 20 seconds, because a lot of the time it will be wasted. So I like to go the 5-set bonus, because I think it's great. The thing is here, you have to choose which 2 items you would like to take as your off 2 pieces. I like to take the chest piece as my Hiram piece, and then the boots. The reason why I take the boots is because when I go into the water and I use my swim fins, I'm not going to lose my 5 out of 5 set bonus for my leather set. And I like to take chest piece simply because it gives the received damage reduction roll, and it gives a nice synthesis effect. It's the biggest piece, so it's going to give a decent chunk of magic damage reduction and resilience on the Hiram set. Another option is you can take Hiram gloves, simply because that way you can keep the Lunafrost that gives you 12% range critical damage, which is another great option. I can't argue against that either. I would actually do that if I didn't already have a Jerkin on my archer at the moment. That's the offensive option. Jerkin is the defensive option. You can also take a Titan's Will, which is the helmet that can drop from the Thunderwing Titan. It is this bad boy right here. Now this one gives you a combo effect that scales your critical rate and your critical rate and your move speed. Stacks up to 5 times. It's a pretty small amount. It's like 5% crit rate, and I think it gives you like 3 to 4% movement speed, or maybe more actually. I can't remember. It doesn't show it on ArcheAge Calculator and server maintenance right now, so I can't check for certain, but it's a nice little chunk of movement speed and crit rate. And then it also has synthesis effects. Now the synthesis effects on ArcheAge Calculator right now are a bit janky. They show as this list of crap. This isn't correct. You can actually get a synthesis effect that gives defense penetration on the Titan's Will. So you can basically, your best options are you can take a single resilience roll, which is nice, or you could take a defense penetration. And I think at Mythic Eternal, you're going to get about 300 to 500 defense penetration from memory from that synthesis effect. So another decent little chunk of defense penetration to add to your defense pen pool, which is really, really nice. So you can take that as well. So you could take boots and then Titan's Will, and then have the other 5 pieces. You could take gloves and Titan's Will, or you could take gloves and boots. It's really up to you what you go with. But this is my favorite setup for archers, just because I like the 5-set bonus for the disciples stuff, and having a little bit of Hiram in there as well is super nice. If I can get my hands on a Titan's Will, I may switch over to that instead of the Jerkin, but we'll see what happens with my archer. So that's that first build. It'll be in the description if you want to suss it, change it whichever way you want. And this is basically what I was just talking about. So this one is the similar build. It just has the Hiram Guardian Fists with the range critical damage buff. The range critical damage Lunafrost on the fist, and then instead of the helmet I had before, it's got the Titan's Will, which would have the defense penetration synthesis effect in this case, so it would give you another decent chunk of defense pen for your hybrid build, which is really, really great. So that's this build. If you want to do the Titan's Will more offensive setup with Hiram Fists, that's the way to go. First build will, in the description, will be the boots and the chest piece, so the more defensive option in terms of that. The only downfall of this one is that obviously if you're fighting in the water, you're going to have, you don't necessarily have to, but as archers, it's a huge advantage to have fins on in the water. So you're going to lose your 5-set bonus in the water, which is a bit unfortunate, but like I said, you can mix and match how you would like. Put the Titan's Will on, put some boots on as your 2 off pieces, and that way you're water friendly. So our third build here today is going to be the full 7 out of 7 Disciples set, so taking advantage of the Ignore Target's full defense. Now, a lot of people that build 7 out of 7 library sets in general, whether it's as an archer or a mage or a melee, they like to build them as full defense penetration builds, which seems kind of stupid in my opinion, because what's the point of having full defense penetration when you have this proc? You're better off doing it as a crit build, which synergizes very nicely with crit being the best way to build archer anyway. Whereas at the moment, defense penetration seems to be the way to go for melees and mages. but works quite nicely with Archer. Like I said, yes, the proc can get wasted if you're bleeding targets and potentially poisoning them. I haven't tested that, but it is really good if it does proc on the right skill. You will one-shot someone, so you can still be range crit damage capped if you're steady shooting and got rhythm stacks up, and if this proc does happen on the right ability, that's fantastic. Now, the one thing I will point out, because a lot of people seem to, whenever I see people's ArcheAge calcs, they don't really take into account that you don't need full 7 out of 7 Lunafrosts. So if you look at the Greed Lunafrost here, sorry, the Rage one, it gives the ranged attack, and then it has the combo effects ×3 and ×5. There's not actually a combo effect for ×7. So a lot of people, just without thinking, put ×7 on. You really don't need to. You're definitely better off having like some received damage on your chest piece, like I have here, and then crit damage on your fist, like I have here. So you don't have to have the Rage Lunafrost on every single piece. But yeah, pretty good build. It's a fun way to set it up. You stack your crit damage. You still get a decent chunk of flat defense penetration, simply because that way you're still doing good damage when you're not proccing your defense penetration. There's no reason not to have it there, unless you really just wanted to have consistent crits and you just take crit rate everywhere, but I can't see a world where that would be worth it. But yeah, you get your procs every now and again. So if you want to play a kind of a fishing build, is what I like to call it, where you fish for the proc, you can start off fights and just, try and fish for the proc before you try bleed anyone or poison anyone. So start off with your conch arrows, start off with some bigger hits, and see if you can proc a defense pen proc on a conch arrow or snipe or something like that, and see how you go. But yeah, anyway, that's that build. I think it's a fun way to play if you can get the procs. If you do get the procs, you will most likely one-shot almost any player that you hit. If you hit someone with a fully charged conch arrow or a decent snipe with this proc on, it will one-shot them, maybe excluding raid breakers, but the proc is kind of nutty when it does happen. You just have to alter your playstyle in a way so that you're not wasting the proc on bleeds and poisons and things like that. So if that suits your playstyle, go for it. This is a great build nevertheless. I will say one thing though, full library sets are a bit squishier compared to anything that runs Hiram, whether it's full Hiram or like part Hiram, part library, just because you're going to have way less toughness and slightly less resilience, because you're not going to have resilience rolls on your Hiram pieces, and just because in most cases, you can't have toughness Lunafrosts on your breeches and on your boots like you normally would. And yeah, so on this build, realistically, you could get 350 more toughness and you'd be sitting at just over 3k, which is kind of abysmal. You could obviously take hero gems in your cap, but I don't like to put those on my build, because for the most part, people aren't going to be spending 20-30k on a hero gem constantly. So there's that. Alright, so this last build is a bit of an experimental build. I guarantee you no one's ever done this, but on paper it could be insane. It'll be a bit clunky to play in terms of your attack speed, because we're running a two-hander, but let me explain how this build will function. Now, this build is very similar to one of our previous builds, where it is a 5-piece library set. So we've got the 5 pieces of library for the 3 and 5 set bonus on the frost and the gear respectively. But then we have a Hiram chest piece, and what was the other piece I took? Just breeches. Okay, so in this case, I have the Temesia's Resolve breeches, which are from the Charybdis world boss. Absolutely not necessary. You could just take Hiram breeches here if you really want, but this is just a way to min-max it. This piece, when equipped, gives you about almost 700 defense penetration, and this is going to be a full defense pen archer build. So the first kind of significant note to make on this build is that it's full defense penetration. So here, currently, you'll be sitting at 11.6k defense penetration, which is really great. If you have Deadeye, you'll be sitting at 14.6, so almost 15k defense penetration, which is really, really good. You can min-max this a little bit more if you want. You could have your Soul Liberator at Eternal. You could make an Ionad Gale, you could make a Aeronor Ring that gives more defense penetration than this one. Or you can make an Ionad one that still gives more defense penetration. Noriet gives less of each stat, but it has 2 stats instead of the 1, so like a Ionad Gale Ring at a decent rank, maybe like Epic or higher, would give probably closer to 500 defense pen, so you could min-max it a bit more that way. And Aeronol Rings, I think currently, depending on which version of the game you're playing on, what region you're in, currently don't have flat physical defense penetration as a role. Maybe it's magic defense. One of the two they don't have the penetration of. I think it's magic defense penetration. But they're meant to be adding it later on. So an Aeronol Ring is an option as well if you want to min-max your defense penetration. But the main calling to this build, and the reason why we use a two-hander instead of dual wield that would give us slightly more flat defense penetration, is that as a two-hander, you get a flat 50% defense penetration, shield defense penetration rate and shield defense penetration. And then you can build shield defense penetration rate on your Hiram chest piece, so I got agility, resilience, shield defense penetration rate there, and then I also have it on the Timesia's Resolve, which you can also get on this one, and you can also get it on the Hiram breeches as well. You get agility, resilience, shield defense penetration rate, and then you can also put defense penetration rate on your undergarment, so I got another 12% there, plus the 50% leaves me with 75% shield defense penetration rate, and 50% shield defense penetration. So the way that functions basically is 75% of the time, if I'm hitting someone with a shield on, so i.e. a healer, clothy healer with a physical shield, that shield's going to give them anywhere between like 5,000 to 6,000 flat defense, potentially more depending on how good their shield is. And 75% of the time, you're going to be ignoring half of that. So it can be anywhere from 2,500 to 3,500 defense penetration against a clothy, which is really, really crazy. So this is basically just like a healer-killer archer. Obviously, your arrows are going to be slightly slower because you're not going to have a crazy amount of attack speed compared to dual wield. You're going to be missing 177 attack speed, but you will get skill damage, you will get the defense penetration rate, and flat defense penetration. Shield defense penetration. And you do get cast time, which, is nothing crazy, but it does make a difference with your conk arrows and your snipes and things like that. And, you do have to cast Deadeye, which is, it's not a long cast time, but, it doesn't hurt to have a little extra cast time. And, it's just a fun, interesting way of theory crafting. I think the DPS, as in damage per second, is probably pretty comparable, I would say, on a build like this. In terms of hitting leather players compared to like just a regular archer crit build. But if you're hitting a clothy with a shield, you're going to do pretty good damage. It's just that your arrows are going to feel a bit slower, but they're definitely going to hit much harder in terms of damage per arrow. It's just they'll be a bit slower. So it'll be a weird playstyle, especially if you use melee skills, things like Overwhelm Bop and things like that to kite. It'll be much slower, but I think it'd be an interesting way to play the game for sure. You get a crazy amount of defense penetration and shield defense penetration, and I think it'd just be a fun way to play. I think if I ever switched over to some kind of defense penetration pure build on Archer, I'd definitely like to try this at some point. I think it could be kind of nutty. I have played a shield defense penetration rate build on a melee before, and it was crazy good. The amount of damage I did to clothies was just wild. But nevertheless, it was fun to do, and I think on Archer it could be viable. So we'll see. If any of you guys are adventurous enough to try this build, then please let me know how it goes. But I wouldn't especially recommend this unless you're some kind of veteran player that wants to try something different. So let me know what you guys think about each of the builds today. Let me know if you're going to be undertaking any of them specifically. Maybe send me your builds if you want to, give me a shout out, give me a sus at whatever build you're playing or what build you're aiming for. Maybe if you want a few tips on the build that you've put together, things that you can change, stuff like that. Feel free to send me stuff in the Discord or, let let me know what you guys think. I love seeing different people's builds, and I love giving my criticisms. I will be hopefully making a video on mage and melee builds in the near future, depending on how annoying it is for me to edit this video. Shouldn't be too bad. But sorry for the bit of a hiatus, guys, and I apologize to any of you who were triggered by my Minecraft videos. I had a bit of a break from ArcheAge for a while there, and I got a little bit sad that I couldn't make any videos, and, you know, I was fucking around on Minecraft and had nothing better to do than make some videos on there. So let's just move on from that, that little bit of my dark past at this point, and let's get back into the ArcheAge, hopefully. So thank you guys for watching the video. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.